Hi, my name is Divya Hazra. I'm a legal advisor at Dantri & Partners Legal Counsel. In my today's video, I will be talking about how to start your business in the UAE. I'll take you through a presentation which I think will help you understand better. And first, I would like to begin with by an introduction to our law firm. Thank you.
Dantri & Partners Legal Counsel is a full-service law firm. Our key practice areas are corporate M&A, environmental law compliances, intellectual property rights, FDI and ODI, and dispute resolution. We have 9 offices globally in 5 different countries of the world. Now, to take you through my presentation, which I will be discussing in today's video, I would be talking about 2 key things. One, the different types of companies that you can establish in the UAE, and second, the key differences between each of these kind of companies. Now, to begin my presentation, I would say I see there are 4 advantages as to why a foreign investor should invest in the UAE. One, being the ease of setting up. The process is simple and it's cost effective. In certain free trade zones, the entire process is online, and you may not even have to visit the UAE to set up such a company. Second would be the tax advantages. There are guaranteed tax holidays in almost all jurisdictions of the UAE with 0% corporate tax and income tax. Third, 100% repatriation of capital and profits is possible with respect to your investment in the UAE. There are no withholding taxes in the UAE, and there are no transfer pricing regulations which are applicable in the UAE till date. Fourth would be 100% foreign ownership. Most companies in the UAE can be 100% foreign owned, especially in the free trade zones and offshore companies, which I will be talking about in my next presentation. Now, to take you through the 3 types of companies that you can establish in the UAE. One is a mainland company, second is a free trade zone company, and third is an offshore company. Now, a lot of our clients ask us this question, whether a business license is required to set up any form of company in the UAE. The answer is yes. You have to obtain a business license before starting any company in the UAE. Generally, a business license is valid for a period of 1 year, after which you need to pay a certain fee and renew the business license. Now, to again jump back to the 3 different kinds of companies that I was talking about. First, the mainland company. Now, mainland company is essentially an onshore company because such a company can do business inside the UAE and outside the UAE without any restrictions. However, you require a local Emirati partner to set up a mainland company, and generally the license to establish a mainland company is given by the Department of Economic Development of the respective Emirati. Now, a mainland company is generally the choice of a person who would want to set up a trading company in the UAE. Because as I will take you through the other 2 forms of entities, you will realize that there are certain restrictions in the business activities that you can undertake once you establish a company as the ones that I will be taking you through in a few minutes. So, like I said, in a mainland company, you essentially have the freedom to do business inside the UAE and outside the UAE. The only thing is you require a local Emirati partner to set up such a mainland company. Now, to move on to a free trade zone company. Generally, a free trade zone company is the choice of, say, a consultancy company which wants to set up operations in the UAE, or if you are a service provider, you can definitely look at setting up a free trade zone company. Now, the reason why I say so is because a free trade zone company cannot do business outside the free trade zone in which it is established. But the benefit of setting up a free trade zone company is one, it can be 100% foreign owned, and second, it enjoys various tax benefits and incentives which are available to a company set up in the free trade zone. Now, there are more than 40 free trade zones in the UAE. Generally, the free trade zones are divided in terms of the kind of company that you want to set up. Some free trade zones are suited for logistic companies, some from IT companies. So generally, that is the division that is followed in the UAE in terms of the free trade zone company. So obviously, looking at the kind of business you want to set up, you should choose a free trade zone company which is suited for your kind of business. The third kind of company which people generally set up in the UAE is an offshore company. Now, an offshore company is generally if you are a foreign company who's looking to set up a company offshore, then you can set up this kind of a company. You can open a bank account if you have an offshore company in the UAE, but you cannot do any business inside the UAE with an offshore company. So it is a popular form of company for those companies which are looking to establish an offshore company abroad without a physical presence. Essentially, there are three jurisdictions which are offshore in the UAE. One is in Dubai, second is the Ras Al Khaimah, and third is the Ajman. Now, the other thing which is there with an offshore company is that it can be 100% foreign owned, and you would still enjoy the tax holiday, which I spoke about before, which is you pay 0% corporate tax and income tax if you set up an offshore company in the UAE. Now, to take you through the key differences between each of these three kinds of company. One, the first thing that I would be talking about is ownership. A mainland company can only be 49% foreign owned. A free trade zone company can be 100% foreign owned. An offshore company can be 100% foreign owned. Now, when it comes to office space, a mainland company must procure office space in the UAE, which has to be a minimum of 200 square feet of physical office space. For a free trade zone company, again, you have options. You can take up a virtual desk, and you need not have to compulsorily rent an office space to set up a free trade zone company. Second would be, I would say, like for a free trade zone company, a lot of people choose the option of having a virtual desk, where basically you have a desk space where you can work if you want, whenever you want. So it can be cost effective to rent such a space like that. Now, for an offshore company, like I said, you cannot have a physical presence in the UAE whatsoever. Now, when it comes to the business scope, when it comes to a mainland company, you can do business anywhere in the UAE, including the free trade zones. But for a free trade zone company, you can do business only within the free trade zones and outside the UAE. Third, for an offshore company, you can do business outside the UAE. You cannot do any business inside the UAE. Now, when it comes to the minimum capital requirements, for a mainland company, it would depend on the kind of company that you want to set up. It can be a sole proprietorship, limited liability partnership. There are several forms of mainland companies that you can set up. So the minimum capital requirement would depend on the form of legal entity that you set up. For a free trade zone company, it depends on the specific requirement of each zone, but there is no set precedent as to what the minimum capital requirement should be. For an offshore company, there is no minimum capital requirement. Now, with terms to visa, so the Emiratis, generally, it's known for this particular condition as well, where if you set up a company in the UAE, it automatically gives you a visa, a residence visa. So a mainland company, the number of residence visa that you can get, it depends on the size of the office space that you rent. For a free trade zone company, the residence visa is granted depending, again, on the size of the office space that you rent. For an offshore company, since you cannot rent premises, you cannot have any physical presence in the UAE, no residence visa is granted. Now, most importantly, what is the cost of setting up each of these companies? A mainland company, the cost of setting up it is high, like I mentioned, because there are more approvals that are required. You need to have a local Emirati partner. But I'm assuming the size of your operations would be much higher if you set up a mainland company. So the cost of setting up is also higher. Second, a free trade zone company, the cost is medium. And third, for an offshore company, the cost is low because, again, an offshore company, the operations that you have is very limited. Now, for the approvals, as you can see in my presentation, the mainland company requires the most number of approvals from local bodies. Hence, you also need a local Emirati partner. For a free trade zone company, generally the free trade zone, which is the management company which is running the free trade zone, generally they grant you the required approvals and permissions. There are no other additional permissions that you require. For an offshore company, there are three authorities that I told you. There are three jurisdictions in which offshore companies can be set up. So those authorities generally grant permissions to set up an offshore company in the UAE.
With this, I come to the end of my video for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you found the video helpful, do subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, do drop in your questions at the email ID mentioned in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.